Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Alex Orton, and I'm one of the owners and founders of Haven. And today, I'm going to present on this topic of how to find the right diet for you. This talk is entitled, Why Do I Still Feel Like Crap After Changing My Diet? Very, very common experience. I'm very passionate about this because I see this all the time. How can we create the perfect diet for you and eat gluten too? Let's get into it. So, disclaimer. You are not going to find out what is right for you today. Okay? That takes a next step into understanding what you need as an individual. And that's not the point of this talk, because that goes against the whole point of the talk, which is we need to understand who you are in order to find the right diet for you. What this is about is it's seeing an opportunity. It's seeing an open door that the paradigm that I'm going to share with you today makes sense to you and you want to take the next step. If you can see the possibility, you can see the potential, you're already on the path. Okay? So my goal for you today is to show you that when you find out what the perfect diet for you is, your digestion and overall health can completely transform. Okay? So what I'd like you to do is make a commitment. If you are struggling with digestive issues or you're confused about what you should eat, you may have any chronic issue and you don't know what you should eat, and this message resonates with you, you will prioritize your own health and you'll find out what your food intolerance is, which I'm going to talk about as one of the key components here of understanding the perfect diet for you. Okay, why do I believe this? I've gone through a huge arc in my own life of a healing journey. I've always struggled with digestive issues. Ever since being a kid, I had serious motion sickness. I'd vomit very easily in cars. I'd get bad stomach aches from things that I'd eat. Sometimes I oftentimes thought I had like appendicitis because I had such bad gas pains. And then as I got into my college and naturopathic med school years, I was still so confused about what I should eat. I was dealing with tons of bloating, constipation, and was just so confused and distraught about what I should be doing. Okay. And that's the key reason why I'm so passionate about this topic. So today, I rarely experience symptoms. I'm living the life I truly want to live, and I'm empowered to heal myself no matter what I experience. And this is a really important point because before I was really living in fear. I didn't know what to do. I was confused. I was scared. My symptoms didn't make sense to me. And now I don't have that fear because I fundamentally understand how to heal myself in a much deeper way than I ever did before. And a lot of that is because of some of the principles that I'm going to share with you today. Okay. My mother also experienced beautiful healing. She has epilepsy and she was experiencing debilitating digestive pain. Doubled over, going to see a bunch of gastroenterologists. And during this time, she was having a lot of seizures. And by following the principles that I'm going to lay out today, she lost 30 pounds. She hasn't had seizures and GI issues in 6 years. So I've seen this affect my own family. And I've also seen this affect countless patients. So I know through evidence of seeing this happen before my eyes that this is effective. Okay. So what are people healing from? Of course, when you figure out what diet is right for you, you're going to heal from GI disorders primarily because your food has a direct impact on your digestive tract. So if it's IBS, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, inflammatory bowel disease, bloating, just that 6-month bloat feeling where you don't know what's going on, acid reflux, celiac disease, chronic diarrhea or constipation, etc. Okay. This is also helping people heal from other disorders because the whole body is interconnected. So what you're putting in your mouth doesn't just affect your digestive system, it affects your whole body, right? Our body is continuously taking nutrients from our food and turning them into energy and rebuilding our cells and then detoxifying. So what I'm seeing regularly in my practice is people are healing from infertility, from endometriosis, Hashimoto's. These are hormonal issues, from things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, these chronic immune issues, anxiety and depression, psychological issues, severe food allergies, psoriasis, autoimmune, right? Immune issues, and then even skin issues, acne, eczema, etc. So figuring out the right diet for you has a fundamental effect on your entire system. It doesn't matter what you're really struggling with. This is going to improve your health, period. Okay. Short bio about myself. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine. I was a valedictorian in my class, owner and founder of Haven, and I've done a number of trainings in classical homeopathy, somatic experiencing, which is a trauma-based method of getting back into your body. Done yoga teacher training, holistic counseling, all about understanding our own mental, emotional, false belief systems about ourselves. Hydrotherapy, an ancient practice of using water to heal, as well as some training in various nutritional paradigms. Okay, very serious headshot here. My buddy Dan Winters took this shot. You may recognize some of these guys. He took all these photos. Be wild, huh? Okay. So the 3 secrets for figuring out the perfect diet for you. Secret number 1, how to cut through conflicting information and instantly know whether a dietary approach is right for you or not. That's the first important piece of information to lay the groundwork here. Secret number 2, how to find the real dietary problem that modern food test and elimination diets miss with one easy step you'll never need to repeat again. This is the key of individualizing and figuring out the right diet for you. And secret number 3, how to make absolutely delicious meals and go out to eat without compromising your health, living the life you want and being healthy. Okay. So secret number 1, how to cut through conflicting information and instantly know whether a dietary approach is right for you or not. We're going to be myth busting here because we need to set the context for how to navigate all the conflicting information that we're all bombarded with online and in books, in the media, etc. Because there's so much information out there, and we always get the feedback from patients that they're so confused about what they should be eating. Okay, so let's do some myth busting right off the bat. You feel like this guy, so much conflicting information, vegan, ketogenic, paleo, completely opposite diets. Should I go gluten-free? Should I go dairy-free? Should I try the Whole30? Maybe that will work. I heard that is helpful. And we just ping pong from one thing to another because we don't really know what's right for us. So let's clarify that. There's 3 myths about diet that all of the mainstream dietary dogmas fall into. And we want to discuss this, okay? Number 1 is that there's one diet that's right for everyone. Myth number 2 is that there's certain foods that are good and bad for everyone. And number 3, that there's specific diseases that should be treated with specific diets. Okay, so let's look at each one of these. The first big one that we just need to clarify is that there's one right diet for everyone. We see this all the time, right? People say everyone should eat like a caveman. It's a very blanket statement. Like we should go back to our caveman ancestors and eat the paleo diet because that's what cavemen ate. Okay? Other people should say everyone should eat vegan. Animal food is toxic for you. It causes chronic disease. We should all eat vegan. Okay, what's the problem with this dietary myth? Our ancestors evolved in all different ecological niches on the planet. There's human beings that have populated literally every part of the globe besides Antarctica, right? We literally, from the equator to the Arctic, all the temperate regions, we've completely populated and have lived sustainably in those areas. We're not like, people aren't going to Canada and then dying. They're able to prosper and live generation after generation healthy lives living off the land, right? People across the planet have genetically developed an ability to consume entirely different diets. We look different. We have different adaptations to different ecosystems that are completely different. The tropics are completely different than the Arctic, and they're different from the temperate zones in the Mediterranean. So people are living off the land, eating extremely diverse diets by nature of how we've evolved. So it doesn't make sense that we should all eat like cavemen or we should all eat vegan, because people are proving that that's not true. There's people that have lived in ancestral areas generation after generation for thousands of years completely healthy. Okay, so that's a myth. It's a total myth that there's one diet that's right for everyone. We can easily refute that looking at the evidence of people living around the world. Myth number 2 is that there's certain foods that are good or bad for everyone. Okay, there's one exception to this, and that's processed foods, because they're not really food. So processed foods are bad for everyone. I mean, they're industrially made products that never existed on the planet until the Industrial Revolution, when we could actually use machinery and chemicals to create the food. So white sugar, white flour, white salt, these are all highly refined industrial products that are terrible for our health. Vegetable oils, very complex level of bleaching and deodorizing and extracting to get oil out of things like soybeans and cottonseed, right? Totally industrial and fake food. Food chemicals and preservatives, obviously. Industrial animal foods, meaning that animal foods that have been pumped with antibiotics and hormones to make them grow quickly, living in very confined feeding operations that are very unnatural. And then conventional foods that are sprayed with all sorts of chemicals that are trace back to wartime era, like using mustard gas and Agent Orange and all sorts of crazy stuff to kill bugs on our food. Totally foreign to the human organism that's developed over thousands of years. Okay, so processed food, bad for everyone. What are 2 foods that everyone thinks are bad? Right? If you're into alternative health and nutrition, 2 foods that everyone thinks are bad: gluten and dairy. So let's just look at those 2 examples, okay? Gluten, in our experience, is usually not the problem dietarily. Now, different people can have specific intolerances to certain foods. That's totally a thing that we see all the time, and we're going to explain that in a second. But to say that gluten is bad for everyone, that's a myth, and it's usually, in our experience, not the problem for most people. Well, let's look at it. People have been eating gluten for thousands of years. Here are a bunch of images of traditional people using traditional equipment to grind wheat into whole grain flour. So we've been eating gluten for a long time. To say all of a sudden that now it's bad doesn't make any sense. There's reasons why people don't do well with gluten, okay? But it doesn't have to do with the fact that it's fundamentally bad for us. Dairy is a common problem. We see this as a common food intolerance. However, it's not a problem for everyone. right? Adele Davis was a famous nutritionist. She recommended drinking a liter of milk a day. Okay. The Maasai African tribes people, one of the key components of their diet is raw milk. And they were studied for how healthy and fertile this population was. Living for thousands of years off the land, having milk, raw milk, as one of their primary sources of nutrition. So, how can we say that dairy is bad for everyone? It doesn't make any sense. In fact, raw dairy has some of the highest nutrients available in our food supply. It has vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin D, tons of minerals, super nutrient dense. Okay, so it's actually a wonderful food. It's actually a superfood if you're not intolerant to it. So we're busting this myth that dairy is bad for everyone and actually saying, no, it's bad for some people, but for many other people, it's actually a very good food if eaten properly. Okay, and that's, again, an if, because so much of our food these days is processed in an industrial fashion, and that makes it problematic. Dairy is an example of that. Gluten is an example of that. Meat is an example of that. Vegetables are an example of that, right? Using modern techniques to industrialize the process, which then makes it toxic for human beings. But that doesn't make it bad fundamentally, okay? There's so much conflicting information out there. We have like research schizophrenia in the nutritional and scientific world in general. And we're always changing our opinion about things based on science and research. Well, let's just look at what people have been doing for thousands of years. People have been eating eggs for thousands of years, having dairy for thousands of years. To say that it's causing disease when historically people living off the land have been free of chronic disease, but only now in the modern age we're experiencing chronic disease. And to say, well, the problem is eggs or cholesterol, doesn't make any sense. And then, after a full decade of the low fat craze that came out, that happened because of all this cholesterol and fat research that proclaimed that fat and cholesterol was bad for human beings, Time magazine totally changed face and said, no, cholesterol is actually good. We see this all the time in nutritional research. So we can't get too caught up in these fads and these trends that make these blanket statements about what's good for human health, when we need to go back to the roots of how people ate, how we evolved to get to this point. If we were suffering with all this chronic disease generation after generation, we wouldn't have made it here. But here we are. So let's understand how we need to integrate with nature, with the earth, live in harmony so that we can be healthy. Okay? Myth number 3, and again, this is a big one, that specific diseases should be treated with specific diets. Okay, we see this all the time. The autoimmune paleo diet, the candida diet, the anti-inflammatory diet, the IBS diet, low FODMAP, very, very popular for treating IBS and digestive issues in the conventional world. The SIBO cookbook, the renal diet for kidney issues, the heart disease cookbook. All of these concepts fall into the mistake of treating people like they're a disease. That's the whole conventional model that we're trying to get out of. You are not a disease. Just because you have symptoms that are similar to other people doesn't mean that we should treat that as a separate disease instead of treat you as a person. Because there's so many individual imbalances that can happen in an individual life that lead to the symptoms of a diagnosed disease. The disease is only the last step in the process. We have to understand the root cause, and understanding the root cause is understanding your unique individual imbalances, not treating you like a disease. That's a very conventional model. We need to diagnose you with a problem, and then all the treatment that we give you is based off of that diagnosis. So everyone who has heart disease is going to get the same heart disease treatment, right? This model of using diet in a disease fashion, it looks like it's holistic, but it's really falling into the same problems that we see in the conventional world that are leading to people not getting better. You see? So this is a myth. We don't want to fall into this disease mindset. We want to make sure that we're treating people as individuals. That is the source of the root cause of disease. Okay? So the first step in this process is just developing your nutritional spidey sense. That means that you understand how to develop the right dietary approach for you. Okay? And all right, correct dietary approaches should have these 4 components. Number 1, they should be sustainable and they should be practical, meaning that you should be able to live your life eating this diet. It shouldn't be a crash diet, something that you only do for 30 days and then you can't manage it anymore. It's not realistic. It should be something that you can follow day after day and maintain it, not because you're sticking to it in some military disciplinary fashion, but because it makes sense, it's practical, and it works long term. Number 2, it should be nutritious and delicious. Remember that diet is fundamentally supposed to give us nutrients. We're going to get into this more in a little bit with secret number 3, but we have to keep in mind that we're trying to extract nutrients out of our food. That's one of the primary reasons why we eat. So if we are not thinking about diet in terms of nutritional value, and we're only thinking about what we should eliminate or falling into these dogmas about what food is right for people, then we're missing a key component, which is the nutrition. It should also taste good, because taste means nutrients. So if your diet isn't nutritious, it's not delicious, it's not going to work long term. Number 3, it should be highly individualized for you, not for disease, not for blanket dogmas about what is good for everyone, but it should be individualized for you as an individual. And number 4, it should actually work. It should actually make you feel good. It should actually get you to the health goals that you're trying to achieve. Okay? So let's look at now how to individualize diet. How do we figure out what's the right diet for you? Okay, and this is getting into secret number 2. How to find the real dietary problem that modern food tests and elimination diets miss, with one easy step that you'll never need to repeat again. One major consideration for finding the right diet for you is identifying your unique problem foods. Okay, many people intuitively understand that there's certain foods that don't work for their individual system. And I am here to tell you that that is absolutely the case. Different people have different unique abilities to handle certain foods. And this is critical to understanding how to figure out the right diet for you, because if your diet doesn't take into account your own unique issues with certain foods, it's not going to work for you because it's going to keep causing problems. So how do we figure out what your unique problem foods are? That's the question. Remember that we don't want to fall into the myth that there's certain foods that are good or bad for everyone. We have to figure out what are your unique food issues. There's 2 options that we see consistently in the alternative medicine space and the nutritional space with identifying dietary food issues. Option 1 is food sensitivity and allergy tests. Very common. Okay? And option 2 is elimination diets. Also very common. Let's look at both of these options. Okay, option 1, food allergy or sensitivity test. So what we're doing here is we are exposing your blood, which carries antibodies that are made from your immune system, to different foods. And we can do that through allergy prick tests, like on the skin, as shown in this photo here on the left. We can see if there's a reaction. We expose the body to different foods on the skin, and we see if there's a reaction with the antibodies that are floating around in the blood that your immune system is producing. We can also take your blood. We can take a vial of your blood with a blood test and then expose your blood to different vials of food and see if there's a reaction in a dish. Okay, that's like a food sensitivity test. The problem with this is that we are measuring what antibodies the immune system is producing, which means that we're fundamentally measuring the immune system. And the immune system is very susceptible to change. It changes with all sorts of things. The immune system changes with our stress level. It changes with the weather, because the weather can stress our body in different ways, both hot and cold. Changes with the seasons. It changes with humidity. It can even change with the foods that we're consuming, because our immune system has to be managing and surveying the food that we're eating. So to hang our hat on the immune system as the best way to measure food issues is not very reliable. And what does that lead to? That leads to results that are very confusing, with a lot of false positives and false negatives. Here are examples of typical food sensitivity panels. We'll see things like dairy, where casein, which is the protein from milk, is moderate. The milk itself is severe. Goat's milk is fine. We'll see different grains that come up. Some are fine, some are mild, moderate, right? Sometimes people have the experience where very random foods that they don't ever consume will come up, like sorghum, or hazelnuts. So we can see that the results are confusing, they're scattered, they're chaotic, and that's because we're trying to measure the immune system, which is very complex and constantly changing. It's a moving target. It's not reliable. It's not a reliable way of addressing what are your individual issues. Then oftentimes people have the experience where they will cut out the foods that are positive, if they can even figure out what foods to cut out, because we have mild, moderate, and severe. So where do you even start, right? And then they'll rerun it in 6 months, and it'll be a totally different panel, totally different results. So then you cut out those. You see, so it's a moving target, and maybe you feel a bit better. I'm not going to say that you can't feel a bit better from cutting out these foods, but it's not a long-term solution that we find to be effective and practical and sustainable. So it leads to a lot of confusion. Option 2 are elimination diets. These are also very, very common. In an elimination diet, you're basically cutting out all of the food sensitivities and allergies that are common. Again, we're falling into the trap here of only focusing on foods that a lot of people have immune sensitivities and allergies to. And again, I'm not here to say that those aren't real. You can have food allergies. And we're going to talk about that in a second, how that develops. But even with elimination diets, we're still hanging our hat on the immune system. We're only cutting out the foods that are very common to most of the population as food sensitivities and allergies. A very common example of this is Whole30, right? In the Whole30 diet, you're cutting out the foods that are common food sensitivities that a lot of people experience. The problem with doing something like Whole30 or other elimination diets is it takes an immense amount of time and effort in order to do the specific reintroduction to figure out what your issue is. So what you do with an elimination diet is you cut out all these foods, which is not very practical or sustainable. You do that for 30 days. And then you slowly reintroduce the food one by one to see what food causes a issue. So it's very difficult to reintroduce 10 foods one by one and be able to analyze whether that food is causing you problems. First off, sometimes you have a food issue, a real individual problem with a food, and it's not going to cause symptoms right away, right? The other problem is there's so many additives in the products that we eat. In order to parse out all the little additives and figure out what in this product is actually causing me problems would take way too much time and effort to actually figure out each individual additive. You see? So it's not a practical and sustainable approach to truly finding the root cause of the issue. We don't recommend people do this because they're usually let down by the results they get. It's empowering, sure. It puts you in control. You may get more information. It puts you in touch with your body. That's all well and good. But it's very important to do something that's actually going to lead you to the results that you're looking for. So you may have some benefit from this, but is it going to get you to the promised land? We don't see it very often doing that. Okay? The question we have to ask is, why is the immune system reacting to foods in the first place? Because again, food allergy and sensitivity tests and elimination diets like the Whole30 are based on typical food allergies and sensitivities that are seen in the population that come from the immune system. So why is that occurring? The truth is that 80% of the immune system is located in the digestive tract. You may have heard that before. What does that mean? Okay. The small intestine is lined with villi, which are like little hairs that stick up into the tubing of the digestive tract. And then those hairs are lined with microvilli, which are even smaller hairs. What this does is it creates a huge surface area. The surface area of the small intestine, when laid out, is the size of a tennis court. That's how big the surface area is. Now, why is the surface area of our gut so large? Because we want to extract all the nutrients from our food as much as possible. So we have a huge area in order to do that. However, food represents some environmental foreign agent that's coming into our body. So our body has to survey everything that comes in. And that's where the immune system comes in. The immune system is lymphatic tissue that lines that entire surface to survey it before it's absorbed into the blood. That's why 80% of the immune system is located in the digestive tract. Okay? So the bottom line here is that it all starts with digestion. The immune system is going to react to certain foods after they've gone through the initial process of digestion. So if you want to look at what's the root cause of this issue, the immune system is a downstream effect of the digestive process. You see? So the way that this plays out is step one, you eat a food or a combination or an additive that you cannot digest properly. Your body has a hard time digesting this. Step two, those foods go undigested into the small intestine. That causes indigestion, bloating, digestive issues, inflammation, and ultimately toxicity, because the process of the food being digested by your mouth, your salivary glands, your stomach, your pancreas, your liver, being all broken down so that it can be absorbed into the small intestine doesn't happen properly. So that there's pieces of food that are undigested that are then inflaming your digestive tract and your small intestine. Your immune system is your digestive system, your small intestine is lined with immune tissue. So then your immune system is triggered by this process, and you develop food sensitivities, food allergies, skin issues, hormone issues, other issues downstream. You see? So poor digestion leads to toxemia, toxicity, foods not being digested and going into the digestive tract, creating toxicity, inflammation, which creates immune reactions. And this is what food allergies and sensitivity panels are picking up on. In other words, food allergies and sensitivities are the symptoms. They're not the cause of the issue. When we identify food allergies and sensitivities and we think that that is going to be the true food issue, that's just swatting at flies, right? This is the idea of we have to take out the trash and not just swat at flies. If you have a can of trash and there's a bunch of flies coming in your environment, how do you solve the issue? The flies are being attracted to the trash, but the flies are annoying us, so we're swatting at the flies, hoping that they go away, and we're swatting them with fly swatters, and they just keep coming because we haven't addressed the root. We haven't taken out the trash because they're being attracted to the trash. Swatting at flies is just treating symptoms. That's what we're doing with food allergy and sensitivity panels. What we need to do is we need to take out the trash, which means treating the root cause. So how do we do that? Okay, if we want to decrease inflammation, detoxify the body, calm the immune system, prevent food allergies and sensitivities, heal the gut, etc., all of these downstream effects, we need to address where the issue starts. In the digestive tract, we need to heal the hole in the middle. That's the digestive tract, a tube running from our mouth to our anus, because that's where this whole problem starts. The number one cause of dietary problems that truly prevents the gut healing, remember, there are individual food problems that people have, but they're not sensitivities and allergies at the root cause. That's a side effect. The root cause are food intolerances. Very different from sensitivities and allergies. So let's look at it. Food intolerances are genetic enzyme deficiencies passed down from our ancestors. We all have enzymes that break down the food that we consume. Enzymes make the whole system function because they make reactions take place in the body. So we need enzymes. But again, we evolved in different ecological niches on the planet. And over the course of thousands of years, we developed the ability to digest and process different foods that were in these different ecological niches on the planet. You see? So whether you're someone from the Arctic, this is a Inuit woman from northern Canada, or whether you're like this Polynesian boy living closer to the equator, we developed different genetics, different propensity to digest and absorb the foods that were in our local region. And both of these individuals eating a completely different diet are completely super healthy because these different groups were studied by nutritionists and doctors. And people from traditional groups on the planet that ate food that was local to the region that they were uniquely adapted to eat were free of chronic disease. So they're both healthy, eating completely different diets, right? But if you took this woman and you plopped her in Polynesia and had her start eating sweet potatoes and coconut and fish, she wouldn't do as well as eating the diet that was local to her area, which was seal and seafood and caribou and things like this that were local to the Arctic, and vice versa, you see? We didn't evolve eating a buffet. The idea that we have this buffet of food only developed in the last 100 years with the Industrial Revolution and the global food system. For thousands of years, we ate food that was local to our region. So it's only in the very near past that we've had exposure to so many different foods. So what we need to do is we need to figure out our genetic ancestry. You know, you may have heard of things like 23andMe, Ancestry.com. These are ways of figuring out where my ancestors are from. How are you going to figure out where your ancestors are from in your family lineage without doing a genetic test? Right? It's the same with food intolerances. How are you going to figure out what your unique food intolerances are unless you do a genetic evaluation to see what your unique intolerances are? So the only way to truly identify this is to do a food intolerance evaluation. And this is so key because once you know what your ancestral food intolerances are, you know fundamentally what food is going to work for your body or not. And then you can truly individualize, you see? With our food intolerance evaluation, we identify enzyme deficiencies for three main categories. The first is food groups. These are big picture groups of foods that certain people are intolerant to based on our ancestry, our ancestral development. We also are able to look at food additives. Remember that many food additives, even additives that are not chemical, they're not like, industrial chemicals, they're derived from foods. So how are you going to figure out all the little additives and what you should avoid for you? We're also able to look at food combinations because, again, traditionally speaking, we didn't evolve eating all sorts of different combinations of foods. We evolved eating more simple diets. So we can figure out what combinations of foods are also problematic for you. The top 5 food intolerances that we see almost 99% of the time are fruit, potato, eggs, meat, and dairy. Are there other food intolerances that are possible? Yes. Can you have multiple food intolerances? Yes. However, we see these 5 food intolerances in 99% of individuals. Some people will have two. Okay. Now, this is really important because almost all of the dietary dogmas that are out there do not account for these fundamental food intolerances that we see in almost every person. The vegan diet has fruit, it has potatoes, Whole30 has sweet potatoes, fruits, meat. Paleo diet is very meat heavy. You see, ketogenic diet relies on things like butter often. None of these diets account for the most common food intolerances, and that is why many people have issues despite following these different dietary dogmas. You see? Our food intolerance evaluation is also able to pick up on the additives that you're intolerant to, which are like hidden intolerances. Because of the food industry, through the Industrial Revolution, things have gotten very complex. The way that our food is produced is not the way that it was produced even 100 years ago. Definitely not the way it was produced 1,000 years ago. So there's many processing methods and food additives that contain intolerances. For example, if you know of the E. coli outbreak that happened on Chipotle romaine lettuce a few years ago, what happened from that situation is that now the industry standard is to use lactoferrin on all pre-washed leafy greens. Pre-washed meaning they come to you in a bag already washed. Now, what that does is it harbors moisture that perpetuates E. coli growth. It allows for E. coli to develop. And lactoferrin prevents E. coli growth, but lactoferrin is derived from dairy, which means that any pre-washed leafy green that you buy at a grocery store, like pre-washed spinach, pre-washed kale in a bag ready to eat, is sprayed with dairy. And our evaluation is able to pick up on that. Many food additives, even ones that are in health products, even ones that we wouldn't consider that bad for you, so to speak, are derived from common food intolerances, like xanthan gum being derived from potato. And then if you even look at the supplement industry, even high quality supplements that are food-based have derivatives from common food intolerances, like vitamin E is oftentimes derived from fruit. So the food sensitivity and allergy tests that are on the market don't educate people on these different little additives. They're just looking at things in a superficial way, and they're not understanding how these different aspects of our food system are derived from common intolerances from our ancestors. Okay? We also are able to figure out common food combinations. And the top combinations that we see are fruit and sugar, potato and grain, dairy and grain, and sugar and grain. Again, these are combinations that we see maintained from our ancestry that certain people can't digest very well. So we're able to figure out your specific food combination that doesn't allow you to digest food properly. And this is a big piece that's missed in many of the dietary dogmas and diets that we see because they don't account for the combinations. So we go from food sensitivity and allergy panels, which are very confusing, convoluted. They don't look at common food intolerances. They don't look at additives. They don't look at food combinations. Very confusing, changeable results, right? The thing with food intolerances is that they don't change because they're inherited from our ancestors. We see food intolerances run in different ethnic groups. We see food intolerances being maintained in families. So oftentimes the children of a family will be a combination of their parents' intolerances. So they don't change. that gives you definitive answers that you only have to do one time. You see, very different from doing a food sensitivity panel where there's false positives, there's false negatives, and it's changeable, and then you reintroduce and all this stuff, okay? This gives us definitive answers. And because they're inherited, every person has at least one food intolerance and one combination intolerance. That means you. Everyone has at least one intolerance and one combination intolerance. We've done this for hundreds of people every single time. That's why I'm so adamant that if you want to figure out the perfect diet for you, you get your food intolerance checked. Okay? Now, many people have food sensitivities and allergies like gluten and dairy. So it's a phenomenon that does exist. The immune system is reacting to different foods. But the reason why that often happens is because the person is eating their intolerance or combination unknowingly every day, which is toxifying their gut, inflaming their immune system, and making their immune system then react to other foods that they wouldn't typically react to. You see? Gluten and dairy are immunogenic, meaning that they have proteins that the immune system can react to, but it shouldn't be a problem for most people if you're not intolerant to them, as long as you're avoiding your food intolerance. So once you eliminate your intolerance, you can heal your gut, and then you can reintroduce foods that caused problems previously, like food sensitivities and allergies, meaning that you can potentially reincorporate dairy, you can reincorporate gluten. So when you find out your food intolerance, your diet becomes less restrictive, less stressful, and more delicious. It actually opens up the possibility because you're no longer cutting foods out because your body is reacting to them, because you understand what your intolerances are. That heals your gut, heals your immune system, etc. Okay? We have some reviews from our patients. Many patients have had beautiful experiences cutting out their food intolerance. This is Gail. She says, I can't say enough about Dr. Alex and Dr. Colby. After a couple visits and determining my food intolerance, I have never felt better. I highly recommend them. You will absolutely feel better. Great result. Here is Bruce. Very classic story here. I diagnosed myself as gluten sensitive and stuck to a gluten-free diet, but still felt crummy. The doctors at Haven did food intolerance testing. Turns out I'm not gluten sensitive, but instead I need to avoid certain combinations of foods. Dr. Alex and Colby provide clear direction about what I should and should not be eating. What a difference. Way more energy and feeling healthy. Two very cool guys, wicked smart. Total thumbs up. Okay? Very common experience cutting out gluten. Still feeling crummy. Here's Tom. He's a local chiropractor. Okay? We helped Tom find out his food intolerances and his family. He's got young kids. As a healthcare provider myself, I'm selective of who I go to. I'm thrilled I was able to meet Haven and have their holistic style of care resonate with my values. My family started care with Haven. We've had a great experience. I've personally experienced improved digestion, improved sleep. I've had more energy throughout the day since starting under their care. My 2-year-old son had changes in digestion as well after eliminating his intolerance. I appreciate their comprehensive process, continued support. Okay? The great thing about the food intolerance evaluation, it only takes a few drops of blood, so we can do it on children, infants even, which you can't do with other food sensitivity tests. So when you introduce foods into the child's diet, you can know what their food intolerance is right from the get-go. Amazing potential there. This brings us to secret number 3, how to make absolutely delicious meals and go out to eat without compromising your health. Now, what we've covered so far are the major myths that we see in common dietary dogmas. We figure out how to individualize your specific diet for your needs. Now, let's look at how to then build meals, right, that are delicious and nutritious. Ever feel like this guy, right? Eating a diet that's super restrictive and not enjoying it at all. The problem with modern food tests, the problem with fad diets, the problem with elimination diets is that it restricts foods with valuable nutrients. There's no reason why we have to demonize certain foods like meat, like butter, fish, dairy, even grains. There's no reason why we need to create arbitrary distinctions between different diets like the paleo diet and the vegan diet. Things are more complex than that. We evolved in a more specific way than that. We didn't evolve with these categories, right? So there's no reason why we need to cut out foods that have valuable nutrients if they don't cause us specific problems. Now, remember, you may say to yourself, well, but butter has a bunch of saturated fat, right? Or eggs have a bunch of cholesterol. Well, remember the Time magazine article. We have seen consistently that so many of the dogmas that we have around nutrition, like saturated fat is bad for you, red meat is bad for you, cholesterol is bad for you, right? Grains are bad for you. Potatoes are bad for you. These all come and go, ebbing and flowing. This is a myth that we covered in secret number 1. So we don't want to fall into that categorical good, bad with foods. When you figure out what your intolerance is, all the other foods that exist in nature naturally are back on the table. Okay? The thing is that nutrients taste good. That's why grandma's chicken noodle soup is good when you're sick, and it tastes amazing because it has all these amazing nutrients that help you to heal. It has bone broth, good vegetables, good protein, right? That's what's healing about it, is all the nutrition. So when you eat good nutrients, your diet tastes delicious. And that's one of the main key factors to identifying whether your diet is right for you or not. Your diet should be both nutritious and delicious because diet is meant to provide nutrients as one of the fundamental principles of diet. Okay? Here are some of the foods that we recommend consistently: butter, red meat, eggs, seafood, bone broth, sourdough bread, sea salt, raw milk. These are all foods that have been demonized for some reason or another. And you may be shocked that the naturopathic doctor is telling you to eat butter and red meat. But if it's not your specific problem, then it's on the table. There's cultures that ate red meat every meal of every day and were completely healthy. Not everyone can eat meat. Some people are intolerant. But if we understand how to individualize, we know not to fall into the dietary dogmas, we can have a much more diverse diet that's completely filled with nutrients and delicious. Ever feel like this? I'm so hungry, I don't care. Or like this, binging, eating sweets, emotionally eating, right? When our cells don't get the nutrients that they need, our blood sugar goes on a roller coaster. This leads to binging and cravings and crashes. So one of the reasons why people binge on food or they eat emotionally is because their body doesn't have the nutrients that it needs to create stability and balance. And our body's begging for that. So it's not just a psychological thing. That's a component. But there's physiological reasons why we crave certain foods because our body needs energy. So we can eliminate this whole process of yo-yoing back and forth, binging and guilt and cravings when we eat a diet that's right for us, that has all the nutrients that we need. Okay? Do you ever feel like this guy? Eating alone. The problem with restrictive, unpractical dieting is that it can lead to social isolation, anxiety, depression, frustration, dissatisfaction. I mean, this is a classic experience, right? Like you can't go out to eat with your friends or go to a party because there's nothing for you to eat on your restrictive diet. Once you understand what foods are good and bad for you specifically, it opens up the possibility so that you can enjoy life. You can be part of our culture, right? Eating with others is good for the soul. It's good even to eat some things that aren't the best for you so that you can enjoy eating food with company. So you can go to parties, you can go out to eat, you can have, all the food on Thanksgiving, or you can have birthday cake on your birthday. It's okay to have certain foods that are part of your culture, are nostalgic for you, allow you to connect with people. Because once you have the empowerment of what you need, then you can make conscious choices and you don't have to live like boy in the bubble. So knowledge is power. This is a really important point, right? When you know what you need and when you know what dietary dogmas are false, you can quickly identify grocery products that are harmful for you or good for you. You can know what combinations may be harmful for you when you're preparing a meal. You can navigate restaurant menus quickly and efficiently. You can even know what alcoholic beverages may be causing you problems. So it's not like you have to be sober the rest of your life either. You just have to know what is right and wrong for you. And you can also find substitutions for recipes. You have all this information at your disposal that's not based on any one dietary approach. The dietary approach that's right for you is sustainable and practical. It's nutritious and delicious. It's highly individualized for you, and it actually gets you results. And I'm here to tell you that if you follow these steps, you will absolutely feel better. Okay? So here are 3 secrets that we covered today. Myth-busting dietary information, figuring out food intolerances so you know what's good and bad for you specifically, and how to then eat a diet that has good nutritional value. So let me ask you a question. If all the food intolerance evaluation did was finally give you definitive answers as to what foods are causing you problems, would it be worth it? If all it did was improve your chronic digestive issues so you don't have to think of them all the time, would it be worth it? If all it did was give you more energy, more balance, and more confidence so you can start living the life you want, would it be worth it? What if it did all of these things? Because I see it consistently help with all of these areas. Now you may think, well, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't actually help me? But what if it does? What if this is a missing piece to your healing journey, to your research and what diets and foods are good and bad for you? What if this is the missing link? So thank you everyone for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Take the first step, sign up for the food intolerance evaluation. It could change your life. Have a good one.